Okay, so let's get started. This webinar series has been designed exclusively for you as participants in the One Planet City Challenge to give you a bit of added value to the effort of climate reporting and joining our initiative. And we want to show you everything that we're up to. And of course, hear from you and get the interaction going. And today, I think we also have some external guests here, and you are, of course, equally welcome. But we wanted to begin with just a brief update on the One Planet City Challenge before we tap into the power of public engagement. So currently, we have over 280 cities from 6 continents on board in this round. And we have, over the last decade, seen over 700 cities join us here in the One Planet City Challenge. We know that many of you are still amending your reporting on the CDP Cloé platform, so we want to let you know that this will close in the beginning of December for the rest of the year. And once the platform closes, we will download the reported data and use it for a couple of things for the rest of the OPCC. And so one of the things that we will do this year is to include the cities that have applied. Over 50 of you have applied to be part of a year of climate action on the digital platform Future-Proofed Cities. And you will be receiving confirmation of inclusion over the next 1 to 2 weeks. So that will be exciting for us. And your CDP reporting will be pre-filled in the platform. Then the next thing that we will do is to send out the feedback reports. All cities that are in the OPCC will receive a final feedback report from us in the beginning of February, and there will be a webinar to explain it and how to present it a couple of weeks later. After that, in this friendly competition, the jury deliberations take place in March and April of next year, where the jury is tasked to choose national winners and 2 global winners. And once that is done, national award ceremonies can start in April and go to, build up to the global award ceremony in May. And in the autumn of 2022, our One Wheel of Cities public engagement campaign will start for all the finalists. So maybe that is also something that Barbara will mention here today. But without further ado, let's step into the power of public engagement.
Super, thanks, Victoria. I will now just stop sharing for a second to go into another mode. And you can please just let me know once this is up that it's working as it should.
Excellent.
Okay, wonderful. I'll just skip to the slide where I'll begin here. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So glad so many of you could join us, and thanks, Victoria, for that introduction. My name is Barbara Evaeus, and I lead the communications for our Global Cities program. And I'll present a little bit of the background about our work on public engagement, our recent publication of a guide, then I'll turn over the mic to Chloé Pahud from Civocracy, with whom we've partnered in designing this public engagement guide. Also, please feel free, I'll try to make this a bit interactive. So at some point, I'll ask you for your opinion, for example, when it comes to defining public engagement and what it means for you. So you're welcome to chat that in and we can have a look at your answers. But otherwise, please use the chat only for questions and not a kind of side discussion going on while we're holding this presentation. I know I personally find that particularly distracting when I'm a participant. So use it please for questions, and feel free to raise your hand if you have a question and need clarity or clarification for anything that I'm saying. And also open for feedback. If you find I'm speaking too quickly or unclearly, let me know, and it will be a good reminder for me to slow down and to be more articulate. So what we'll look at today is actually what do we mean by public engagement? Why is it important to us? Why is it important at a local level as well as at all levels of society, including key stakeholders in debates, in action plans, etc. And then we'll talk a little bit about the guide that I've mentioned, what our motivation for that is, and what you can expect when you have a look at that, which we hope you'll do following this webinar, and look specifically at the guide, which is divided into several sections. And we'll look particularly at what we call the 5 factors for success, what we mean by public engagement in practice, which is a couple of examples and cases of what cities are doing in this realm. And then finally, just questions for you to consider on your side when it comes to taking further action or beginning a public engagement journey. So when it comes to our focus on public engagement and why we're doing it at WWF, specifically towards cities and at a city level, it started very much as an outcome of our work over the past decade with the One Planet City Challenge, where we've spoken and had contact, as you see now, with hundreds of cities. Throughout this 10-year period where we've been working with OPCC, we've had about 700 cities join the competition. They've covered 6 continents and been in about 54 countries, and from 54 countries. I'm giving this little background because I'm not sure that all participants here actually are members of the OPCC community. So basically, we ask cities to report their data. The idea is to offer support with this public engagement effort, to ask the public to support cities in their work with climate action, and then also just to recognize and acknowledge that public engagement can take many forms and be on very many different levels, and it's really up to a city, the cities yourselves, to decide when and where it's most appropriate and in what manner and fashion it takes. And then finally, we've noticed through the years, through what we'll talk about in just a second, our We Love Cities campaign, that cities are very interested in engaging their public, have different levels of experience and understanding for what we mean or what public engagement can be and what kind of potential lies behind that. And that's one of the main motivators for actually working in this area from us. It's actually come as a recognition on the side of the cities who seem interested and in need of further support here. So we've run a campaign called We Love Cities, which is a public engagement, basically, campaign where the finalists of the OPCC have had an opportunity to profile themselves on our platform, welovecities.org, and then to engage their public in an expression of love and support for what the cities are doing as far as their sustainability work is concerned. And they also have an opportunity to submit suggestions and improvement suggestions about what the city might do even better. And we're hoping to encourage cities to use those suggestions to engage their public even further and to involve them in all aspects of their climate action planning, as well as implementation of those plans, as you'll see in just a minute as we go further here. So this will take place in the 3rd quarter of 2022, once we've identified a number of the finalists for the OPCC, and may extend this to other cities as well. But traditionally, we've offered it to 1 to 3 finalist cities per country, per participating country. And as you can see here, these are just a little bit of a sampling of what the cities who have engaged have done. They have, for example, in the first picture here from Batangas, you can see the mayor with her cap on, who was very involved in the We Love Cities campaign and was actually out and about in the city and engaging in different activities to encourage others to participate as well. Park City is the one who you see here to the right with several different art murals. And this was done as part of their We Love Cities campaign, where they encouraged artists. They chose a number of local artists to work on repurposed wood and then made an exhibition throughout the city where they communicated different aspects of their sustainability work. So actually, this is just very quickly to give you an idea. There's really no limit to how cities can engage through the We Love Cities campaign, but of course, beyond that, in public engagement. This was done in an upbeat, inspiring way that creates a kind of portal for people to enter and to engage with the city. Beyond that, I'd like to know if you have ideas. Sorry, if someone could just mute over there, that would be useful. In your minds, if you wouldn't mind just chatting in, what do you mean when you think public engagement? What does that mean for you specifically? Here are a couple of things that we're talking about, but we'd really be interested to hear. And I'll just give you a minute or so to give that some consideration and what you might, how you might define public engagement in your world. And for this, particularly of interest for those of you who actually are engaging, you're public already now, if you might just chat in and let us know what that means for you.
Joseph writes community consultation.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sabina. That's an important aspect as well, just the empowerment part of this. Oh, great. Okay, so we see from Eva that we're talking about inhabitants as well as companies, and that's definitely true. You know, how do you define your key stakeholders and how do we engage those in different activities that are suitable for just them? And Gunilla is saying to inspire behavioral change, which definitely can be a part of this. Great. Well, thanks so much for that. And if anything else comes in, feel free to just chat that. We have looked at this broadly, but look kind of at co-creation and development and planning. That's excellent. And we've looked at this more broadly, and we've seen it as a way of informing and involving the public. And again, the public can be defined broadly as well in actions and decisions of the city. We've looked at how it can be something that's a way of translating citizens' critique and feedback into a positive force, so that it's not just something that you're concerned and reluctant to receive, but actually how it's important to have your finger on the pulse and know what people are thinking so that you can avoid possible future conflicts. It's a way of tapping into citizens' resourcefulness and creativities. Really, citizens are the experts. They're living, moving, breathing your city on a daily basis, and they have knowledge of life on the ground that can be seen as invaluable and that can then be channeled into your city projects. It's also a way of considering basically if and how certain aspects of your decision making or implementation might be turned over to the public. And of course, not every city or every aspect of your work is appropriate to be turned over to the city, but actually involving cities in the implementation is a great idea, just to really tap into those ideas and increase the level of ambition relating to their involvement. And this can be done in a variety of levels, obviously. And then really we want to look at why this is important. And this was meant to be kind of a fading in and out of these answers, but unfortunately in this mode where I'm this little kind of figure down here, I'm not able to do that. So we'll just go right through this instead, but please feel free to chat in here if you have ideas. And Victoria, if you wouldn't mind supporting, because I don't have the chat open at this point, why it's important to you. Is your city already working with public engagement? And if so, why you've identified as something so key and important? And also, if you're not and are interested, why you might be. Feel free to chat that in as well. And I'll just stop for about 15 seconds and give you some time to think about that. I'll just continue on here. And again, please feel free. The public can block important actions if not included. Exactly. So really, you're preventing, this is done in a preventive fashion as well. Again, to ensure that the public is on board and that there's buy-in as you go. So when we look at public engagement, why it's important, we've seen it that it strengthens the relationship between the city and the public. It's building consensus. It's identifying new ideas that citizens are forming, and also creating new partnerships with your citizens right from the start. You're ensuring success of individual projects, and you do this really by improving the performance through the collaboration, through diversity. You're allowing space for your citizens to alert you of maybe unseen obstacles, which is what Victoria just referred to, and really can provide possible solutions to those obstacles early on, and especially important to work with the public on large global challenges like climate change. I mean, there's no doubt that you need a very, very large and broad consensus around this. I see that Joseph wrote, the people on the ground zero, they have firsthand experience of historical events, disasters, etc. Yes, absolutely. And also, basically, we see that it fosters inclusivity and diversity of engagement and ideas, and basically brings in a very diverse mix of voices and public representation. You open up the city to diversity of ideas, and you can come from different segments and sections. These ideas can come from different segments and sections of the public. And basically allowing for this discussion and debate. You're creating a platform where cities can be aware and anticipate these objections in advance, as we've mentioned earlier. And while better to do that in advance than when the project is underway, and that it becomes much more difficult, time and resource intensive than to backtrack to make those corrections. And basically you're creating trust between yourselves and your citizens, which of course obviously will help expedite further work and support that you'll need for those other aspects. And we created this guide that was mentioned earlier based on these discussions and experiences with our cities, the recognition that there were many cities who were actually still just considering at the consideration stage, and that maybe not as aware of the true benefits of actually engaging the citizens. And as many of you know and can certainly confirm, sometimes citizen engagement can be seen as something that's time and resource intensive. So due to lack of resources, it's often opted out. But in fact, again, if you're preventing future obstacles. In the end, the idea is that this will be something that actually helps you optimize when it comes to use of resources. So WWF conducted a survey where we surveyed OPC cities who had been participating with us in the past. This was done at a kind of top level broad survey. We then followed up with one-on-one interviews with a number of OPCC cities, and then had consultations with other public engagement experts, as well as city planning experts within city planning, to see that we were taking in realities from different areas and different expertise. We worked together with Civocracy, and I see Chloe's on the call now and will be speaking with you soon, who's also an expert in digital engagement, and will talk to us about the benefits of that shortly. And then we did some additional research and evaluation of the academic material available to see that we were covering this to the best degree possible. But we wanted to keep it at a very accessible and alluring level so that it didn't get too heavy and too academic. There's plenty of information out there on the net. We wanted to kind of create a beginner's guide to public engagement. And what we did is we identified, with the help of Civocracy, 5 factors for success when it comes to public engagement. And these are common factors. We're not reinventing the wheel here. And we've looked at these, and we'll go into it in a bit more detail as we go through this presentation, and the guide goes into each one of these in a little bit more detail, and there are more examples from experts and from people on the ground when it comes to the cities. So the first one we'll look at is defining your goals and expectations. And basically this is important because without that, you really don't have any compass about going forward and what to do when it comes to public engagement. So it can help you solidify details. It helps highlight some of the minor discrepancies, which is what we talked about here as well. And it helps you align and focus your efforts for more effective use of your resources. And it also guarantees and ensures that everyone is actually on the same page, and that we're, speaking the same language. And when we use terminology, that we actually mean the same thing with those terms. So you can read more about this, as I said, in the upcoming, in the guide itself. Then we'll look at the next, again, I'm doing this quickly and briefly so we can turn over the floor to Chloe shortly, but please feel free to refer to the guide for further details. Again, we look at being transparent and why that's important and why it matters. It may be counterintuitive for some cities who aren't used to working in this way or have decided for different reasons that it's not optimal. But it is really important to demonstrate clearly how and why your decisions have been made, how you're planning your project, and what priorities they're based on. And if you give citizens, you offer your citizens this insight into the decision-making process, as well as involving them in various stages of the projects, you creating trust and building trust that will serve you well as you go forward. There's no doubt about that based on the research and what we've seen. So being inclusive, and when we talk about this, it really is about reaching out to very many and varied members of your city and different citizenry and the different stakeholder groups. It's very easy that those who have traditionally been most vocal and visual are those who continue to do so and be so. But how and who are you missing when you're taking, let's say, the easier route out? So how can you be as inclusive as possible to really reach out and see that you're reaching a diverse audience? And one way of doing that is looking at what the existing barriers are for those people. Might there be language difficulties with new populations who have immigrated into your society? Or might it be the type of communication channels that you're choosing that aren't reaching certain populations? So really it's about understanding barriers and then doing what you can to create a more inclusive environment. Really, every voice matters, and how can you ensure that you're reaching those so you don't have a skewed view of your public and what's important to them. And so public engagement is really a conversation. You want to show your commitment to your citizens. One of the key mistakes is assuming that your conversation with your citizens starts once the project is there and out for implementation and finished. You really need to back up and include citizens early on and see that the public participation kind of as a building this long-term relationship with your citizens and living the collaboration means that your citizens are included in your planning throughout, not just at the very end when you're really thinking, now we've decided what we need to do, we need their support in rolling this out or getting acceptance for it. So public engagement doesn't mean turning to your public once. It's about creating a dialogue with them and time again approaching them for support and to tap into their experience and knowledge. Next, we're going to look at trusting your citizens, and there's no doubt that trust is an essential ingredient here, that it's crucial in order to the success of any of your projects and the rollout and implementation, that your citizens trust you. They trust your you trust them, they trust you. So you need to trust their expertise. And again, we've talked about how they're the ones with their ear to the ground, they're living, breathing, and moving around your cities. You have to trust their collective judgment and trust the information that can turn into participation. So information and informing your public and vice versa is one thing, but actually participating, engaging, and consulting is a completely different thing. Trust that citizens, that criticism or negative feedback actually is a great investment of active participants. This is going to be invaluable to you as you move forward. And it can be turned into something positive instead. So as long as you're being transparent and open, this should not be a problem. So we had in the guide, and I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because we'll be running out of time, but you can see that we've consulted with a number of our cities who have participated in the OPCC previously, and you can get some real kind of wonderful examples of what they're doing when it comes to public engagement. Park City is one of those examples, and we'll just speak briefly about what they're doing, where they're actually reaching out to people and they're going to places where their citizens are. So rather than them determining where would it be convenient for us to communicate, they're thinking about where can we be to reach these audiences that maybe are more difficult ordinarily to approach or to reach. For example, parents with young children and families are quite busy running around between work and daycare and after school activities. So where would a great ideal place to reach families, for example? It might be to cooperate with the daycare centers and tag a little session on to the end of the workday for a daycare center and hold kind of public meetings there or dialogues where people are. Are they at the supermarket? Can we do something at a shopping center, for example, where people are on a daily basis and kind of etch out and carve out some space and time there. So anyway, really, this was one of the most interesting aspects I thought of what they were doing. They were really putting their citizens first and trying to be as wise as they could about finding where were people, that's where we're going to be, rather than trying to get people into City Hall or into other places that have been traditionally known for kind of public engagement and dialogue. This creates really a sense of social shared commitment to climate change goals when the city is out there discussing this, involving people early on in the planning stages and making them, giving them a sense of their importance in this entire planning system and debate. So early on and consistently as often as possible. We also had an experience here from Thailand, and this was quite interesting as well. And it was actually where, and excuse me if I'm mispronouncing this, which I'm sure I am, it's Phanat Nikom, which created local committees that were elected by the communities within the municipality. So each community could then elect their own committee from the public, and then they would be used as a kind of sounding board towards officials in the city. And that the fact that they were elected by the community meant that the community felt really some kind of direct representation and was very enthusiastic about this. The committees meet with local government to discuss community needs and government plans. And then one of the projects, for example, that the city and the committee had decided on was to have what they call the Big Tree project. And it's a part of a 4-pillar strategy that includes the city of trees, no pollution, renewable energy, and sustainable consumption. So this is one of the pillars, and they would build further on this, where they're greening their city and then would work eventually towards their no pollution guides, increase in renewable energy, etc. And actually, you can read more about this in the guide as well. It goes into further detail. And I'll skip Malmö, Sweden, which is also a good example of involving the public in one of their southern cities. And we'll go on to just the idea of questions to consider, which is also a part of the guide. When it comes to planning your public engagement strategy, there are some important questions right up front that you need to consider in order for this to be realistic for you and eventually for it to be a success. The questions here are basically, what are your necessary resources? You have ideas and you have goals, and in order to see that you're able to reach these in a realistic and effective way, what kind of resources will you need within the city? Then clearly to identify your target audiences so that you're directing your resources specifically to those audiences and it's not being kind of wasted along the way. When you have a clear idea of whom you want to reach, you'll be developing material and communication that is more suitable to those audiences and more effective. What kind of data will you need to really look at how to go about collecting that data so that it does become useful and that it will help define and help you navigate when it comes to decision making. And then ultimately, really, who else do you need to involve here? It can't be your city alone. There's no city, even the most well-resourced cities in the world can't do this alone. They need partners. And who are those partners that can help you achieve these goals? From what sectors of society might be? Is it the business sector? Is it civic society? Who are the and if so, who are the most optimal partners for these particular projects? So these are things for you to consider and that you can find more information and detail about in the guide. And then another thing that you'll find here is that we have a resource for further reading. As I said, there's lots of information out there, lots of academic material out there. The guide is not trying to do what they're already doing. We're giving you an overview, but please refer to these resources if you're interested in really developing this further. And then we also have included 2 annexes in the guide. One of them will kind of give you a form for these questions to consider that I listed earlier and just help guide your thought process in this. And then we'll give you further examples of public engagement ideas that can help you get an overview of other ways of thinking beyond our 5 factors of success, what others are doing, accepted and general theories around public engagement that we hope and think you'll find useful. We developed this guide really as a kind of beginner's guide. It was for cities that were maybe, again, hadn't begun their public engagement journey or at the very start of it. But in fact, what we've learned through a pilot workshop we ran recently, where we had cities with varying degrees of experience, even those cities with more experience feel that they need extra support and guidance. So if that applies to you as well, please feel free. We'll send the link where you can download the guide, and feel free to share this with your colleagues and to keep an eye out for upcoming seminars or webinars around public engagement, and eventually maybe even in real life seminars and workshops. And again, Actually, this wasn't just a webinar, it was a workshop that we ran as a pilot, and we had participants from around 10 cities, 10 countries, sorry, and multiple cities and many different native languages. It was held in English, but what we hope is that eventually they'll be held nationally or regionally in local languages, and that it will be available for you as well. So with that, I'll close here and gladly have you direct questions to me or Victoria or Anthony, and we'll try to answer those in the chat. And actually, before I turn over to Chloe, is there any outstanding question that we should answer right now?
Yeah,
there
are like two that you may want to comment on. So Midan in Indonesia says that Sri Handayani, that the most difficult point is to change the public habits. Is there anything about that in the guide?
So I would say that when it comes to changing public habits, it's very much a behavioral change issue. So related to an upcoming seminar that we'll be doing, but actually by inviting the public in, what we found as well through the public engagement work and inviting people into the discussion, it's easier to understand what the hinders and obstacles are, why it's so difficult to get them to change their mind, because you start to get an understanding for what it is, what level of knowledge do they have, what level of experience, what are their experiences. And based on that very in-depth understanding of your citizens, which you can only get through the engagement and discourse, it's easier to then present your views, present your information, to get support for your work based on this kind of mutual understanding. It's much harder to do when we're making assumptions about the public and the way they think or the way they act. And there's also an openness. Once you've created trust with your public, which we've talked about, it's one of the key factors for success, it's a lot easier to have a dialogue with them and a mutual understanding. And hopefully that will create more of that kind of change that you're looking to achieve. I hope that answers the question for now, but please have a look and see if you can find more information in the guide, and do follow up in our upcoming webinar on the 9th of December, I believe it is, where we'll be talking about behavioral change, one bite at a time, specifically around food, but can certainly be related to other areas as well. Anything else, Victoria?
So Shamila Reed wondered how we factored in the pandemic and whether or not, or how I can do public participation in a virtual world. And maybe that is something Chloe will actually.
Exactly. It's a perfect time to turn over the baton to Chloe. I will say, just from WF side, we run this We Love Cities campaign that I spoke to you about, and we reached, I don't know how many tens of millions of people with that campaign. We considered actually canceling the campaign last year or earlier this spring, just due to the pandemic, because we were concerned that we wouldn't have enough on the ground activities. But if you'll remember and saw in the guide on one of my earlier slides here, actually they had some on the ground activities. People were masked up, they practiced social distancing, they were actually out there. But in fact, the digital aspect prevails, and prevailed even earlier before the pandemic. It was a wonderful way of engaging people through various platforms. So it's something to consider, and it's a real challenge that we all have. So thank you for that question. And now over to Chloe.
Yes, hi everybody. So nice to see such a diverse crowd of cities. Actually, on the change of public habits, I'll go back also on that, because it's a very, very good question. And I think it's one of the great key indicators you can put when you start a public engagement journey. Alors, where are you? Up. I'm going to share my screen. Up, share. Is it working? And do you hear me properly?
Yes, we hear you very well, and we see the screen.
All right, perfect. So hi, everybody. My name is Chloé. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Civocracy. We are a public, like digital platform. We are doing citizen engagement. And today I would like to present you what are the opportunities to use a civic tech platform, what are the limits also, a few concrete examples. And I'd like to also take on the methodology we are using at Civocracy based on a lot of best practice and like 6 years of experience on how to use the platform. I'll go back to that later too, but in Civocracy, we are not pure technocrats, so we don't think that applying digital to a problem will save the world, but actually the way you handle your platform and the way you handle like your public engagement digital campaign will do a lot of the magic. So civic tech, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept, but basically are all those new technologies that are fostering civic engagement. So there is a lot of them out there. I think what you want when you use a civic tech platform is obviously the opportunity to reach out to much more citizens and local actors. So from a town hall meeting or like all your on-site activities with this digital tool, you suddenly have like a much bigger crowd in front of you. I think one very nice advantage too is what we call in France traceability. I'm not sure if you're using this in your city, but like to make things very transparent, because inputs and everything you put online is like lookable, traceable. So it's a very good way to make all the process you put in place visible for your community. They can follow the different steps. They can go back to previous step. You can like publish the outcome, etc. And then, of course, I would say the last opportunities to innovate and work with experts. I think there is a lot of civic tech platform out there. I don't think I've ever met one founder, one team that is not deeply passionate about what they do. And like we spend a lot of like brain power and creativity and agility and iteration to really foster what can do online digital engagement. So what type of tool? Again, if you're not familiar, there is so many things you can do with digital and so many great platforms out there. You can use Idea Box, online voting with sometimes like blockchain technology, interactive mapping, participatory budgeting, online debate, polling, quiz, etc. I would say that in Europe, but also worldwide, the democratic innovation scene is vibrant. I put a few names, so I invite you to have a look up like, oh, what those people do. What's interesting is I think as we share all the same mission with those technology and vision, we still have a different take on how to do it. I'm guessing in each of your country, you also have a scene. So it's also a way to like kind of embrace different kind of journey. We're trying to be creative in the system and cooperative. So we iterate also as we do. And so now we'll present you like in a few slides what we're trying to do at Civocracy and the very particular take we put on what should be citizen engagement today. So for us, there is like 3 main principles, which is inclusive, participative, of course, and fun. Basically, we've been focusing a lot the last month, especially on cities engaged in the fight against climate change. As we think it's a very real threat, it's also becoming a very special opportunity to raise all the stakeholders you have and your local actor around your vision. But it's usually tough to rally public around what you do in your transition goal. Usually you communicate and you spend a lot of money in communication, but it's not always easy to see what are the reach of your campaign and like what people think and what they learn. And at the end also, we have to put the fault on us, which is like, citizens are not always there. So sometimes you do craft like good communication, good participation, but the participation rate is usually quite low. So what we say is like, you're leading a great vision for your city and it needs to become an ongoing, growing movement. We call it constant campaigning. Basically, how to build a movement. So first of all, you create a coalition. You don't left over the inclusive part of it. You, of course, always try to reach out to people who are not there. But first, you need to have people who really believe in what you're trying to do. You always put your vision in the center. And at the end, you show progress at any time. Basically, I think citizens are far from disengaged today. They just don't engage so much in the political sphere. But we see the youngst and like so many people rising for like, what is climate change? So they go around cause and they want to come to your vision and what you want to do there. So we crafted what we call a 4-step program. One is the first very important step is assemble internally your team. We call it the Fantastic Four. Basically, when you start a participation project, it's very important to have a transversal approach within your cities. Like it's changing. We call it like agile governance. It's not always the principle you use, but basically you need to put around the table and around your participative process, like 4 key competencies: the leadership, so it could be the cabinet and the elected people; the communication, it's just a tool. If you don't communicate about it, nothing will happen. The public participation department, if you have one, and the key project manager of the issue you will choose. It could be the head of sustainability, it could be the urban planner, like it depends what kind of topic you want to launch with your citizen. This is your project team, and those are the Fantastic Four. Second, rally your community. It's a step in digital we usually kind of left over, but again, launching a very powerful communication campaign to get people on board on your platform is a crucial point. It's not magical. If you put a tool out there and you don't do anything about this, people won't know. So here you establish what we call a hub, like a central place where all your stakeholders will be able to to access your page, subscribe to your page, and be notified. You can publish event, document information, and I'll show you later some participative tool. We call it the Kennedy method. So basically you have to see big. This is what Kennedy said, right? We're going to walk to the moon on this decade. For us, I think the same, to embrace your community and have them on board your goal. You need to say, okay, in 4 years, guys, we want to be there and we need you to jump on board with this. This has to be like a really collective action. Third step, what we call communication. So communication by collaboration. Communication is so outdated. If you just do top-down approaches, it's not fun anymore. So like really beyond communicated, you rally and you activate. This goes from the question you have, change public habits. There is no better way of changing people's habits than by involving them. And there is so many different ways of involving them. Of course, I think one of the big pain points of cities is like lack of resources in both of budget and time. So you can't be constantly into like listening and like doing co-creation, but there is very little step you can take. So people still can engage in a light and fun way. This is what I'm showing. So make it fun and easy at some point. So there is a way to keeping them informed. You can co-create some content with some of your stakeholders, create some small questionnaires, poll quiz from the community hub. And then sometimes when it's useful, when it's necessary, when you can add it to your process, you mix with a dose of depth. So this is where you can engage them in more like consultation mode, or even co-creation. So it can be ideation, it can be online debating, like there is many ways you can engage like with like civic tech tools, your community in a more like in-depth process. And finally, of course, measure what matters. I think sometimes the problem of the misconception around participation is like, seen as I have to do participation and then I do it and try to put in my process. The best way when it works is when it serves again a proper vision, and then when you can measure at every step what matters. You have to define what are your KPI. What do you want to achieve with this? Do you want to create awareness? Do you want to reach out to a specific target in your community? Do you want to have a big number? Do you want people to understand better what you do? Or do you want even to measure like the change of habits? Our personal KPI at Civocracy is the trust level. We do believe that when you start a participation process and when you're going to measure the trust level after 6 months and after a year, this rise up. So celebrate the small and the big step. Again, you cannot always like deploy all your energy on it. We are very aware for cities it's difficult, but there is way where on your platform and on everything you do, you show usually like the small wins. So long-term impact on the territory, again, everything related to green policies takes time. And this is why like you need to engage process of participation that are on the long run. To be the pioneer, what we call communication 2.0, what to expect. So after 12 months, again, I think it's a strong movement supporting your project. One very important thing we see is like a better understanding and acceptability of what you do. And finally, of course, is like a territory in motion, right? So what the goal of this behind is supporting the transition and supporting and even accelerating the transition. We've got about like 80 governments we've been working with around the last 6 years, mainly in Europe, all size, all culture, all like very rural area, very big metropolis, all political side, like on very various of projects. It goes from urban planning, it goes from like ecological transition, education. And we've been baking that. Again, this is a working process. At Civocracy, we are very aware that we are contributing to a part of the solution, and it's a constant iterative process. So we also work very closely, with our governments. We have like some partners. Again, I think for the change we want to make, it's very important for civic tech platform to work in also in an ecosystem. So we have a very systemic view of the society and every pieces that can go. So those partners are like, so WWF holding the topic around climate, biodiversity, etc. But we also work with a foundation who are specialized in like new political leadership of creating what they call creative bureaucrats. And then at the end, so I think we also have to be aware and what are the limits of those tools. Again, if you have a pure technocratic approach to it, this is bound to fail. First of all, they are just tools. Really, the magic of those tools lies in you and how you will use them, how you set up expectation, what are the resources you're going to put, what you're going to do with the results. They need to be part, of course, of a holistic participation strategy. Offline is great, but all what you're going to see on the guide about what cities have been doing online is also like a great addition of like what you can do. And some part of your population, of your stakeholder will be much more comfortable offline. Some will be more comfortable online. So this like combining those methods is like a beautiful way of like making much more impact. They need acculturation. This is the third point. Again, from you, from your team, but also from your community. So the responsibility just doesn't lie on you to do a great job. Of course, your community needs also to be more used to those processes. You have to start with small steps. You have to be understanding what are the participation maturity of my community and how I can like make them grow. Same for your team internally. Usually what we try to find at Civocracy is like in the city, the local ambassadors are like really the one that will be the driving forces, empower them as much as we can. It can be in your team, it can be in your community. And so they will also help build the movement. And of course, digital tools require consistency. So if you just do a big one shot and then it's done like a tick box, hey, I've done one consultation, I'm a participative city, it's not enough. You need to carry on. And of course, agility. So this is also rely really on us, by the way. It's about testing, learning, listening, and iterating, and again, and again, and again, and again. And voila, this is about it. So I'll be very happy now to have like a moment to answer your question. And I think Barbara will make sure that she sends you this document afterwards.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Chloe. Very concise and super inspiring, I think, just that whole platform and the kind of thoughts behind it. Also, very much built on what we talked about in the guide, the need for not just one-off engagement, but long-term, consistent, and going back and, really keeping people informed and being transparent. It's crucial, and a great tool for doing that, of course, is the digital for those who do have access to digital communication. So if there's any question to Chloe, please chat it or just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to share the final slide here and ask you to please just keep in mind, let's see here, keep in mind some, screen share. And that we will have a number of upcoming seminars, for more webinars in our series. One I mentioned already, which is on the 9th of December, which is changing behavior one meal at a time. The others are the 13th of January, Influence the Future. It's with educational and youth material and engagement. And there are a number of others, that you can find if you go into panda.org, OPCC-participants. And one other thing, again, Victoria, let me know if there are questions for Zoe here in the chat. I think there'll be interest certainly in the Civocracy's platform, and we'll share Chloe's presentation with you. We'll also share my presentation. And for now, you can see in the chat, I believe it was the last comment was from Victoria, where you have a link to the guide, for those of you who are interested in seeing that immediately. And we'd be also really interested in your feedback and experiences on the guide and public engagement generally. Other than that, I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope that you found it useful, and please don't hesitate to just fire away any questions you might have to the organizers. And with that, I'll say thank you to everyone, and go forward and prosper in your public engagement.